Hello, and welcome back to the BFA Baby podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Hartman, and welcome to the second podcast of 2024. I did want to pop in and kind of talk to you about the episode today before we get into the meat of it. This episode will be talking about body image in dance, food, exercise, all that kind of stuff, and if this isn't the episode for you, totally feel free to skip it. Do what is best for your mental health. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to pop in and preface that before we get super deep listening. If, I won't be going into any specific behaviors or weights or whatever, but if this isn't the episode that you need to hear right now or tune into, totally fine, skip along. I will see you in the next episode. But if you are along on this journey with me, welcome to the episode. A little bit heavier today, but it's kind of been like, I have a list of things I want to talk about in my notes on my phone, and this has been like top of the list. This has been top of the list for a while, and it was like the first thing that came to me when I was planning this podcast. I was like, this podcast, I started this podcast with, I want to be the voice for someone who was like me when I was, growing up in dance, when I was in high school, transitioning to college. My family didn't really know what was going on. They didn't really know what I was trying to do. And I talked about it in the cold open for the season, but I just relied so much on what other people had done and said, and I didn't really have a voice of reason because there was no one I could really be like, hey, I'm feeling this way, I'm not feeling this way, and if I can just shed some light on some stuff that you may face, you may feel, validate that as an experience as a dancer, then if I can validate that for one person that's feeling it and doesn't really have people around them that can relate and connect, I would definitely hope that this episode is that. But yeah, so let's kind of hop right into it. I'm gonna be real, this is like one of the only episodes I haven't really planned out. I just kind of sat down and started talking, so we'll see where this one goes. But yeah, feel free if you want to jump off the train at any time. This episode might be a little heavy, might be a little tough. I don't quite know where we're going to go, not for real. But yeah, so we're just going to kind of start talking. I think, there's always... Sorry, like I said last week, we need to make a cut down of all the times I'm yawning on the podcast, like for real. Like, what are we doing? Anyways, I kind of wanted to start at like the very beginning, and it's something that I've really noticed, like as I teach beginning ballerinas, like 3, 4, 5, they just love it so much. They love it so much, and they got their little baby cheeks, and they got their little baby tummy, and their sleeves are too long on their leotards, and they gotta roll them up, and my whole journey with the food and my body and exercise and how I dance, I've really started to focus on, yes, taking it seriously, yes, this is my career, yes, doing what is best for my career, but like coming back to that, because it's just so beautiful. They just love it and they express, and it's just, I love that. But yeah, so if you've kind of been following along, we have talked a lot about, I grew up in a competition studio, and again, I don't speak for the company, I don't speak for the dancers, I just kind of my experience. There's the image that everyone has. If you're like, oh, ballerina, you're gonna pick an image in your brain, and if you ask most people, okay, Dad, stop yawning, I'm so sorry. If you can't tell, it is really, really gloomy outside. It's been kind of gross all day, but yeah, you're gonna, if you say ballerina, most people are gonna imagine a stick, skinny white girl with her hair up in a bun and a pink tutu. And not to say that that's incorrect, because that's what, the media portrays a lot about ballet, but we're seeing so much more diversity and oh my goodness, we are seeing much more diversity in body shape, in skin tone, in the way muscles look, in hair texture even. And it's like, ballerina is such a widely racing term, but even when I was younger still, it was very much still just the skinny white girl, and that's what you wanted to be. You wanted to be stick skinny. And I have a really vivid memory of being in a rehearsal, and there was a girl that was in my rehearsal with me. Literally could not stop yawning. Oh my god. There was a girl that was in rehearsal with me, and in passing, our rehearsal director was like, oh, did your mom get you started on that diet? Like, what? We were kids. I remember being like, huh? And, did your mom get you started on that diet? And she was like, yeah. And that was kind of my only expression with that person specifically, so I have no idea, like, what all of this entailed. And, it's just kind of, that was kind of my first moment that was like, whoa, like, it really wasn't, like, that was crazy. And, there was another time where so we had this, like, trip planned to go to Six Flags St. Louis. I'm from St. Louis, if you don't know. So we had this family trip planned. We were going to go to Six Flags St. Louis, and it was, like, planned, and there was, like, this talk at the studio that I didn't go to. And it was all just kind of vague, and it was like, if you're on the comp team, if you're in the company, go to this talk. And we were all like, okay. But we had this adventure planned with my family. So we were like, we're not gonna go. You'll be fine. I was like 7. Like, you'll be fine. It's not that deep. And from what I found afterwards, it was a nutrition talk, and not in the kind of way that a nutrition talk is, hey, all foods can fit in moderation, but it is important as an athlete to think about what you're putting into your body. Like a good nutrition talk, which we'll get back to nutrition talks as we jump down the timeline. But, it was very much like, these foods are good, these foods are bad, like tying inherent moral value to food. And that is something that I think the arts overarching, not even just in dance, overarching performance is tying your worth. Tying not just your worth, but like emotional worth, good, bad, moral value to food, wherein like all foods fit, again, like I said, in moderation. Obviously, just be mindful of what you're putting into your body. Like, for example, we're having a pizza party tonight to celebrate getting our couch back in our apartment, and like, I'm gonna film an audition tomorrow. Okay, I'm gonna have pizza tonight, but we're gonna offset it. We're gonna have some fruit, drink some water, just celebrate. Food is celebratory, and when I was a kid, there was totally not that message. And in the world that I'm in now, in the college dance world, kind of jumping ahead, in the college dance world that I'm in, I'm gonna drink and then my audio stopped. But I forgot we didn't have a drink on the podcast. Tart cherry juice with apple juice added in it is our drink for the day. But yeah, anyways, so in the college dance world that I'm in, there's a big conversation on, let me back up, not even a big conversation, but just like a saying that's like, if you have a really hard dance, like, oh, this dance will eat your lunch. And we used it a lot when doing a dance called Sun Target last season. Crazy, like 8-minute piece, super high energy, super just everything on 100. And it was like, okay, Sun Target will eat your lunch. Like, prepare to eat before, prepare to eat after. Fuel your body and refuel your body as you need it, because this dance is a fucking beast, okay? Like, that was really the energy, and that, like, changed such a big outlook for me, is, like, you have to replenish your body as it's going. And I think with that, it's really just knowing what your body needs and what your body is taking in as it's dancing. Obviously, you can dance on anything. You can dance on an empty stomach if you want. I mean, knock on wood, but I'm partial to that, and I made it a goal this year not to be, especially for my morning classes. Like, I had like a 9 a.m. jazz class last semester, and it was always just, I would go work out, I would drink a coffee, I'd go work out, and I'd go to dance, and I'd eat after. And it really wasn't for any particular reason. It was just kind of what I had always done and I had always adopted, you know. I had become less and less of a breakfast person as I came to college, you know. For the sake of prioritizing my sleep, which if you listened to our 2024 episode, you would know that, you know, I'm really prioritizing my sleep this year. I always am, but sleep is such a big part of your recovery for your body, and it's really important that, you know, you're getting enough sleep to support all the work that you're doing. And so with that, when I had all 8 a.m.s my very first semester, like, breakfast just wasn't an option. I would just drink a coffee and go, which, like, you know, is fine, but I would realize just how my dancing felt, like how weak my dancing felt. And if I had time one morning to go get breakfast or something, kind of whatever, or I would eat right before class, you know, if something came up or whatever, I was like, oh, I feel supported, I feel energized, and it's like, yeah, no shit. Like, it's just kind of an interesting thing is the topic of that'll eat your lunch, and how instead of being that something that you strive for, like, this rehearsal's gonna eat your lunch, and then you're just gonna wait till dinner. No, you're gonna go to the dance that's gonna kick, you're gonna go rehearse the dance that's gonna kick your ass, you're gonna refuel with a good snack, and then go hang out at dinner, you know? And I think circling back to my days in competition, the big commentary on your body was really crazy. And this is like late 200s? No, I was not alive then. This is late 2000s all the way through most of the 2010s and about the first half of the 2010s. And there was just so much less of a conversation about the judges critiquing children's dancing, which, like, that's a thing. We compete, that's what happens. But at that time, there wasn't a conversation that's like the boundary between critiquing the dancer and the dancing. And I think that, from what I can tell, we are really getting into a just strictly critiquing the dancing, which is literally their job, is to critique the dancing and not the dancer. But when I was competing, it was not like that. I mean, I have memories of watching back those tapes and being like, you walk on stage and the judge is like, you know, hi, I'm Taylor from O'Fallon, welcome to the stage, act number 212. And you walk on stage and immediately they're like, I wouldn't wear that skirt with that body type, and like stuff like that. It's like, it's more than just being like, oh, if you extend all the way through the backs of your knees, your legs will look elongated. Like, that's a technique aesthetic thing. But there was like always full-on comments about like how our bodies looked. And around the time that I was phasing out of competing and going strictly to my ballet training, but I was like, it was kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out, I started going to summer intensive auditions. And I remember we had written feedback one year, and there was a note that said, you won't get to Broadway with legs like that. And that really shook me. I was like, oh, okay, so we're still doing this. Like, they were commenting on our bodies when we were kids, and now that we're a little bit older, we're still doing this? Okay, cool. And that was kind of my very first moment that I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And I feel like that really shifted my brain into like taking in all the information that I'd been given. I was in a really toxic environment with a really toxic outlook on food and your bodies and what you should look like to be on stage. And then all of a sudden, it happened to me, like, outside of that talk. Like, I was kind of realizing, like, oh, we are not safe here, this is not a healthy environment. Did I have the words at the time to verbalize that? Not really, but in my heart, in my body, I think I was starting to feel that. And then, you know, I go out into the real world, this, like, outside audition, and it's, like, very blatantly happening to me, and it's like, whoa, okay. And I think that was the first time that my outlook was like, I should do something about this. And should I have? No, I was a child. Like, your body is your body, and, you know, you're working hard and you're doing so much, and your body's gonna react how it should, and how it realistically and healthily should. And I think this is a really good time to bring up the older kid, teen, young adult ballet dramas that were kind of circulating at this time. Not even just ballet dramas, but like show dramas, you know. I think when I was growing up, there was Dance Academy, we had Glee, we had, there was another one, we had The Next Step, but I was never really into that. But I kind of want to talk about Dance Academy and Glee mostly in this segment, and I'm literally just rambling, but in Dance Academy, there's a really big point of Abigail, her character, and her throes of an eating disorder. And, you know, you see her throwing food away, you see her lying about what she's eating, you see her getting dizzy and she, like, collapses. It's like that classic, like, collapses in rehearsal type moment. And, you know, that was kind of like one of those things in media that was really pushing that stereotype that is just not real. Like, that's just not what happens in real life. And I mean, like, it does. Let me back that up. Let me rephrase this. That kind of stuff does happen in real life when you're in a bad situation like that, you know, but it's not every single ballerina. You know, it was really pushing that stereotype that, like, all ballerinas are, like, doing what they did in the 1900s, and all ballerinas are, like, eating cotton balls, you know what I mean? And I remember that being something that I was like, I saw it happening. It's a plot in the show, you know, it kind of fades out through a couple episodes, and, like, you know, I saw that happening, and it was like, whoa, okay, like, look out for that. Like, look out for that in myself, look out for that in my friends. And it was a good educational moment, I think, but it was also, like, the very first time you really saw something like that. Like, everyone knows that the picture in their head of a ballerina is thin, but it's also just like whoa, like, okay, like, it can get really bad. And it was educational, but also it was like, you know, like, in the show, Abigail was the best. She was the best ballerina, always was. Going down the history of the show, she then becomes a star professional, and not that, again, like, we really don't know if we had the words to verbalize this, but there was a moment where it was like, is she the best because she has such sharp discipline in her food, in her workouts, in her training? Discipline is very important in the arts. I will not doubt it. I really thank ballet for the discipline that it gave me. However, if it crosses into that unhealthy boundary, that's where you really start having these problems. And, you know, I don't think I had the words for it, but there was always that ticking in the back of my mind that, like, is she the best because she has all these boundaries and rules that the other dancers don't have? You know, and I think having that media was like, ooh, okay, like, you kind of start thinking about it more. And then I kind of want to talk about Glee. And Glee came into my life when I was a little older, but I was still young, you know, and it's, like, in the middle somewhere. I think it's, like, season 3 or 4. And you meet Marley. She's a new student. And you see her struggle with an eating disorder herself. You know, and it was, like, one of those things at the sleepover that trope at the sleepover, like, the popular girls are like, oh, just throw up. Whoa, what are we doing? And I think, like, I mean, it's just such a product of its time that's, like, that was a thing that was happening. I mean, it's still happening, but I think now I'm very thankful for it. We have so much more of a commentary of, like, hey, that's a problem. We shouldn't be promoting this. Like, purging in any type of way is not a result. is not like a means to an end. You don't have to be doing all that. Like, and it kind of goes back to like all foods fit, you know. And I just think having those portraits in media so young. I mean, not on the hate of the producers and showrunners and directors and writers and everything. I mean, like it's a product of the environment that they're in. You know, these are both high performing art kids. It's a product of the environment. Unfortunately, it is. And you know, there was just that media coming in at you was just really something sharp and something strong, and it did kind of put the image in your brain of like, oh, okay, like that's what the talented ones are doing. Even if they're fictional, you know, you want to be the best girl. You know, you do when you're a kid, and even if it's fictional, it's like, is that what they do? Because it's such a trope in all these shows. And yeah, I think while we're on the topic of media, and I do delve into this, I have a whole episode about like dance portrayal in the media while we talk about this. I do want to shout out 2021's, I think it was 2021, Tiny Pretty Things on Netflix. I'm literally going to watch it tonight. Because I just had this itching to like watch it again. But Tiny Pretty Things on Netflix, Oren, played lovingly by Barton Copperwhite. Shout out Barton Copperwhite. Now in The Outsiders, the musical. So that's really sick. He plays a character named Oren who has his own struggles with eating and food and everything. And not only is that an appearance of male eating disorder struggles in the arts, specifically ballet. There we go. Shout out Tiny Pretty Things for that. But you also get the angle of, you know, you can see that, yes, he is talented, but you see the toll it takes on his dancing. It's hard for him to get through class. It's hard for him to get through a workout. He can't even get through like a photo shoot when they're just like posing and ending and posing and ending. And like there's so many other layers to it. You know, he sees himself on the monitor at the photo shoot, and it just fucking ruins it. And you see how he treats himself in the gym, how he treats himself in class, how he's like so stuck in this like top to bottom mirror on his door at his home. And I think that Tiny Pretty Things did a really good job of not only showing male representation in this, because it goes across all genders, you know. It's a product of the environment, unfortunately, and I think we are getting away from that. But you know, it shows it's not just like, oh, they collapsed once and then got help. It's like, this is a long-winded thing. This affects all aspects of your life, not even just when you're dancing, but when you're taking pictures, when you're working out, when you're hanging out with your friends. Like, there's a scene somewhere in the show where they're all at lunch, and you can just tell he's, like, really stressed the fuck out. It's like, eating in public is, for him and his story, was a big thing, and you can just kind of, like, feel it, you know? And that was kind of a thing, and I think that was kind of, like, I was older for Tiny Pretty Things, and I think I was able to look at it more objectively, like, this is part of the story, this is a character, this is not what I have to do to be great, you know? And that was kind of that conversation when I was a kid with, like, Dance Academy and Glee. It's like, it's always the stars that this happens to in those old shows. And, even, like, Center Stage, like, Maureen, the girl with the bangs, she was, like, the best one, and everyone wanted to be her, but she was, like, ruining her body, you know? And I think the conversation here comes with the general perception of the arts, you know? The idea that this happens all the time to every person. I mean, like, there was a time where I had, like, a sweatshirt on, like, up for my ballet studio, and I was, like, I was driving, so I had to be, like, 16. I was 16 or 17. I had a sweater with my ballet company on it, and I was getting a sandwich to eat before class and rehearsal, and it was like a Subway type thing, you know, they're making your sandwich, and he was like, oh, do you want any dressing? And I was like, no, I'm good, thank you. And he looks at my sweater, and he's like, oh, is Nutcracker coming up? Like the immediate, like, he had to have, like, had some kind of you know, but, like, the immediate reaction of, like, you don't want dressing because you're not eating as much because you're going on stage soon. Like, that immediate jump was really jarring for me to hear, like, even for someone that's not even, like, in, like, that's not an environment you'd expect it in, you know, like, you're at a competition, you're at an audition, your dancing is getting looked at, you know, that's an environment you kind of wouldn't be as shocked to see it in, but then, like, in this environment, I'm a customer. I mean, like, no one else was there, it was just me in the store, but, like, what? Like, it was just so out of pocket, and I had to be like, oh, haha, just kind of, like, laugh it off, like, what the fuck do you say to that? Like, I was so taken aback. And it didn't, circling back to, Sun Target, it really didn't take until I was in this fucking monster of a dance to be like, okay, I can't be doing my full day and rehearsing this piece. I can't be doing that with, like, nothing in my body. Like, I can't. Like, you have to plan it out. And as much as people can tell you that, as much as you can read about that, I have found with, you know, my friends and everything, is that it's, in, like, my experience, it doesn't click until it happens to you. It doesn't click until you are, like, shaking on the floor after a rehearsal and you're like, okay, something needs to change. It doesn't click until it gets a little scary. Not that you have a full-on health scare. I'm not trying to be like, oh, just see what happens. Like, no, like, don't have a full-on health scare, but, like, it isn't until you realize, oh, like, I'm barely fighting through these rehearsals. It isn't until you realize all that you're like, oh, like, everything that all the people that have, you know, had a good outlook on it, you know, food has no morality, all food's in moderation, you know, that everyone there that says, like, pace yourself, you're in a hard piece, you're in a hard show, snacks all the time, like, eat, you need more, you're an athlete, you are an Olympic athlete. We talked about Sun Target like we were fucking Michael Phelps. Shout out Michael Phelps. Is he swimming in 2024? Someone put that in the show comments. Tell me if Michael Phelps is swimming at Paris 24. Anyways, but we were literally treating this like we were Michael Phelps for the Olympics. We were constantly eating, we were constantly snacking, we were constantly drinking water because it was just such a beast to tackle. And like I said, you don't really realize that effect on your body until it happens to you and you're like, oh, I need to, like, seriously make a change. Yeah, so Sun Target was a really big kind of pivot point. You know, I was really struggling during the learning and rehearsal process. There was kind of like a breakdown moment, and then I was like, okay, we need to, like, turn this shit around. And I think I've now come out stronger on the other side, and I really use my recovery and learning to not only further my career, but further my career as a teacher. You know, I don't ever want to be that teacher that's like, 10 years down the line, there's a dancer in a therapy office that's like, I had this teacher and she put all these whatever pressure standards on me, and I never want to be that for someone. And that's why I really promote when I teach is, like, dance is for everyone, dance is for every body, dance is for every look. If you have a body and you dance, you're a dancer. If you have a body and you do ballet, you're a ballerina, you know, type B. And yeah, and I kind of wanted to round out this episode. Sorry it's short. I really didn't plan it. I really didn't know where it was going. But yeah, so I kind of really wanted to round out this episode by talking about an experience that I had on my college campus recently. So we have a thing I think it's every fall semester. It was fall semester last year too. And basically we can go to all these different types of panels. And they're, like, throughout the day, and you can get class credit for them, like, for the day. And they're panels about mental health, they're panels about, you know, history, they're panels about, you know, like, there was, like, a yoga one, a massage one, like, take, like, self-care on your body, and it's like, fully specifically just directed towards theater and dance kids. And at one point, we had a really great conversation about consent in the workplace, like, in the art, in a rehearsal space. We had a really great panel on that. Really enjoyed going to that one. One of the days, I went to one about fueling as a performer. And like I talked about, you know, I'm kind of on the other side of this long-winded journey that maybe I'll delve into at some point, but whatever. I'm kind of on this long-winded journey, and I think I'm on like the better, we're on the up, and I was like, okay, I'm interested in food now in a way that is proactive, in a way that is healthy. I'm not interested in food in a way that is like all consuming to the mind. So I was really looking forward to going to this lecture and being like, okay, let's talk about it. Like, this is a working professional, this is a professor. Let's talk about, how, things she's learned about fueling her body, education she has about it, whatever. And I came to the lecture and really found that it was very much, it came back to that energy of like, these foods are bad, cut them out, only eat like this, only be doing things like this. And it just wasn't really realistic for who we were as college students, both financially, emotionally, socially. Like, it made a good point, yes, but like, it was just so very limiting to like the experience that, like, to the audience. We're all college students, it was very limiting. Some of us only have access to on-campus dining, like in dining halls, or if you live in a sorority house, that it's not up to you what you're eating, and even if you live in an apartment with a kitchen, you only have such a tight budget for groceries. And what this panel was kind of discussing was really unrealistic, and yes, probably is better for you, but like, it wasn't realistic, and it was putting a lot of pressure on things we should and shouldn't eat. Like, we should not eat this, we should not do that. Like, no, hard stop, no. And there was a lot of talk about like, that's this many calories, and that's this much like of your daily whatever. And like, yeah, that's a fact, but it's also like, it was just so loud. It was so loud. I fully left because I was like, this is not serving me. This is bringing me into one of those being like, oh my god, I ate before this, should I have not, because I'm not dancing as much today? Like, it was one of those like spirals. And it was like a minute or two left. I had a voice lesson to get to anyways, and I walked out. I was like, I have a voice lesson to go to, and I left a little early. It's time to have a voice lesson. And like, that stress and that pressure that was put on this panel, and I talked to other people that were at the panel, and we all kind of felt the same like type way about it. We were really, really like, oh my god, like gutted about it, because it felt like we had come so far, and so many of us have struggled in the realm of food. It felt like we had come so far, and then this was taking us like 6 steps back. And what really hurt was that the professor on the panel was just talking from her personal experience. She didn't have any outward education. She didn't bring in like a registered dietitian, nutritionist. It was just kind of like, this is what works for me, so you should do it too. And it's like, yes, I can understand the value in knowing what works for someone, but it was very limiting, and we were all kind of like, okay, that works for you, a fully fledged adult with like a salary and like money and stuff, but that's not realistic for where we're at in our lives, and not realistic for, maybe even not realistic for our bodies, and that was just kind of a very jarring moment where I had to be like, okay, they said this, but that doesn't mean that it's to the core, like, end all be all. Yes, they're someone of authority, they're talented, you respect them in their work, but you don't have to respect something that they said that was hurtful, or not even hurtful, but just kind of like, maybe not as well-intentioned as they wanted it to be. I don't think that, this professor came onto the panel with like intentions of like changing the diet culture of the theater and dance department. I think it was well-intentioned, but it just didn't read that way. And it was kind of, there were a couple of us that were kind of like, okay, deep breath, like it's not that big of a deal. It did kind of spark some mental kind of, you're just kind of like, your brain starts running in the way you don't want your brain to start running. But kind of once you jump that hurdle and you're like, okay, I accept that I listened to that, I was there, I accept that that works for her, but I also accept that I have found a routine that works for me, and I'm gonna stick to that. I honor the fact that she sat down and talked with us. I honor the fact that it works for her, but I'm gonna stick to what works for me. And maybe even like, if you even took a small thing away from it, that's great, you know, like you're learning. But the biggest thing was like acknowledging like, this is that school of thought, this is my school of thought. We can, as in your own person, as your own performer, figure out what works best for you. And that was kind of like the biggest thing when that was, because that was an experience that I had that I was like, whoa, why are we going backwards? Why are we going backwards? But yeah, so I'm really proud of being able to like step over that and being like, okay, yes, I acknowledge this, but I'm gonna keep doing what works for me, and we're just gonna see where we end up. And that went, you know, that was really great. And yeah, I don't think I have much more to say. I should have, I'm not talking about it now, I should have kind of scripted some bullet points out, but I do kind of want this to be a continuing conversation that we have on the pod. You know, I want this conversation to continue. I want there to be back and forth. I would love if you would like to talk in the comments about what you think about how food is presented in the arts, how it was in your life, how it is now. You know, I would love to like strike up a conversation with you guys about it. You know, this is something that is always changing, and not even changing as a whole, but it's so different person to person. And I would just really love to get your guys' feedback, you know, kind of learn from you guys. You can learn from me the way you listen to these episodes. And I just really wanted to shout out that this is a place for conversation. You can comment on the podcast, comment on the Instagram, send me a DM. You know, like this is an open window for conversation, and I would really like to keep that forward as we move into, you know, podcast episodes that are maybe a little more heavy. And I just really kind of wanted to shout that out. So, you know, there's conversation outlets. I'm totally a conversation outlet. If you just kind of want to talk through, ask questions, tell me things, I'm all here for it. And I'm really excited to see where the rest of these episodes take us. Thank you for tuning in and listening. I know it's a bit of a heavy topic, but thank you for tuning in and listening. You can follow the podcast at BFA Baby Podcast on Instagram. There you can comment and DM, and we can talk about the podcast. You can also please, you can recommend what you want to hear about on the podcast. Again, comments, DMs. One of my most recent posts is just like, what do you want to hear? Let me know. I'd be happy to talk about like anything you really want to. Not too much is off the table. But yeah, thanks for coming along on this slightly heavier episode with me. Thank you for listening. Please rate and review on Spotify, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Meredith, a kiss. Mwah.